Hey there, hope you're doing really good. This is the third time I'm doing this live, Facebook Live, as I am recording a podcast episode. So that said, let's jump right in here, and I'm going to start recording this podcast. Okay. Hey everyone, hope you're doing fantastic. Daniel here, hope you're doing really good as mentioned. Plenty of things to talk about today. I think there are 3 comments from the YouTube channel, 2 emails, and 1 other message that came in via Facebook Messenger. Before we start, nothing here is medical advice to anyone, just me sharing general thoughts that applies to really anyone that has a similar problem to the person that is asking a question. Now, with that said, let's jump in here and look at some comments. The first one is not actually a question, but rather it is a really nice comment that I wanted to read a part of it here. And I encourage anyone to read this comment from Ellen Letterman. It's a comment on Insomnia Insight 246. And she wrote about a few articles she's written and a blog. And I still have not gotten to read those, which I will. But just a quick excerpt here. From an article by a sleep psychologist, and where she says the following: as this sleep psychologist points out, a couch potato doing nothing but playing video games all day long may not need as much water or calories as an Olympic gymnast in training, in that enough sleep is different for everyone and may differ throughout your life. Now, the first part of this I thought was an analogy that I could really spin off of and make more of, but I think it's a really good point. I have always felt that sleep need kind of depends on activity in a way, meaning not in that sense of like, you got to really get out there and run a marathon and that's going to make you sleep. Not at all. But if you use your mind in kind of a creative way, in doing something that's fun and engaging and learning, I think there's more to kind of process for the brain in a positive sense, and that it gives you more sleep, as opposed to when we get really worried about things. And then we also use the brain a lot, but not in the same. But that I don't think requires the brain to process as much during sleep and need sleep as much. So kind of emerging thoughts there. But I thought this was a very interesting point from Ellen. I just want to thank Ellen and everybody else that's contributing so much. So, okay. So with that said, let's move on to some questions. And the first one is from, where did it go? Here it is. It's from MFF from 9 hours ago. So MFF, and this is also a comment actually to Insomnia Insight number 246. And MFF wrote the following. Daniel, hello again. I recently read an article in Roy Parvin. Maybe you've heard of him. It's about how he couldn't sleep one night and how it turned into a year of no sleep at all. I'm scared thinking that's possible. I can't forget that. Is it even true? I'm a little panicked. So I want to say the following: that not sleeping at all for a year is not possible. So I think that alone, I hope, will make you a bit less panicked. I think there are a lot of people who say all kinds of things about sleep, and in fact, we're going to talk about that in another question from Daniel. And now, when somebody says I didn't sleep for an entire year, that's something remarkable, something like that draws attention. A lot of people you say things, do things for attention, so that's something to consider. Another thing to consider is paradoxical insomnia, which there's so many examples of that on this channel alone. People that feel like they don't sleep at all, or people that feel like they slept maybe just a few minutes or an hour or something like that. So just to again, the main thing here is like, no, you can't sleep at all for a year. That is nothing. That doesn't happen. Okay, So that's a little quick answer there. Hope it was helpful nonetheless. And I feel like I jumped over a question here. Did I? I don't know, Christina, no, I did not. So let's move up here because there was definitely another one. Here it is. Okay. And this one is from Poida Smith. And the question from Poida is as follows. And by the way, this is a comment to episode 244. Great video. What is the efficacy of CBTI for individuals diagnosed with mental health disorders like ADHD, GAD, etc.? Common to hear mental health professionals link insomnia as being associated with mental health disorders. Can CBTI be used with sleep medications? Great questions here. Great questions. So for those of you not familiar, ADHD is attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and GAD, general anxiety disorder. And I want to say I haven't read much literature on insomnia and ADHD. But here's the kind of important point, is that there are no contraindications for CBTI. That is the latest I've read from the Academy of Sleep Medicine. There has been sometimes I've heard voiced concerns about if you have a seizure disorder or if you have bipolar disorder, you shouldn't really restrict time in bed too much. That said, I haven't really read any reports either of any negative consequences of CBTI. So generally speaking, I feel there are no real contraindications. I never read anything about ADHD, but I feel there's no reason why it wouldn't work. When it comes to anxiety, things get really interesting because I feel like really lately, there are more and more studies showing that CBTI can really help with anxiety and depression. And there are even some studies showing that it can help kind of regardless of whether you had insomnia symptoms, or also kind of the CBTI techniques, even in the absence of insomnia, can help with anxiety and depression, which is really encouraging and exciting. So I wanted to share that. Now, can CBTI be used with sleep medication? This is a really good one. And I think I have something really important to share with. And this I learned from Martin Reed. So credit to Martin Reed for this one. So he told me, and I found this to be true, that if you're on a sleep medication but you're not sleeping that well, and you do CBTI, it works as long as you take your medication kind of as prescribed same time every night. There's no variability. It will work. CBTI works, and it also, if you don't take sleep medications, CBTI also works. Now, when things get really tricky and when it doesn't necessarily work is when medications are used conditionally, which means the following: that you go to bed and you kind of let me see what's going to happen, and you wait and you kind of in bed and you're let's see, I've been in bed in a half an hour, I'm still fine, I can wait longer, maybe I should take this medication, maybe not, what if I don't take it, am I going to sleep tomorrow, should I have the dose, should I take it? And then finally 3 a.m. you're that's it, I'm giving up, I'm going to take this medication. That doesn't work, because the kind of the what if when you haven't decided if to take it or not really disrupts sleep and the whole effort. So I think that's a really important one. And I felt there might have been a follow-up question from Poida. No, we just had more of a discussion really here. Okay, excellent. Now, with that said, let's move over to Facebook messages. And as I was recording this, I realized there was actually more than one. But let's start with this one. It's from Sheadon, who sent me a message. I believe it was, it was Friday, actually. Friday. Okay. Hello, Daniel. So glad that I recently discovered your podcast and YouTube channel. Thank you for all the insight. I want to say, as always, thank you for sending me questions. That is really what brings life to this channel. I have a question, please. I've been doing CBTI through a program called Sleepio. My problem is waking up through the night and early awakening, wide awake 2 hours before my alarm goes off. Since starting sleep restriction 2 weeks ago, it is as if my body adapted to the new window, and I'm now waking up way ahead of my new sleep restriction alarm clock, sometimes 2 hours before, which gives me a total of 4 hours of sleep. I live in a studio bedroom. When I'm awake, I can't really get out of my bedroom because my entire house is a bedroom. and I can't leave my bed without getting eaten by mosquitoes that carry malaria. Okay, that's a concern, obviously. My question is it normal for sleep to get significantly worse before it gets better? And what do you recommend me if I'm unable to leave the bedroom and bed if I'm awake? Again, thanks so much. Good questions, and I do think I have some meaningful answers here. First of all, completely understand the scenario. We're always told, or part of CBTI is like if you can't sleep in bed, you should leave the bedroom. By the way, there's definitely a lot of flavor to add to that. It's not necessarily always that cut and dry, but that the problem here for Sheadon becomes, what if I can't leave my bedroom? For very understandable reasons. So actually, let's start off with the following. I again, in a discussion we had with Martin Reed some weeks ago. What I can't remember exactly how this started, but he told me about he talked about the nosedive and how like when you start CBTI, there's often this like things get worse before they get better. There's the kind of that nosedive, and you're almost crashing, and then things get better. And I actually have it in my list of like things to talk about here on the channel. I've written down like talk about the nosedive. So yes, things often get worse before they get better. And typically, yeah, that is my experience, that the first week is the hardest one. Week 2 can be really tough too. But usually like week 3 to 4, that's when people start noticing that things are getting better. And these can often be really subtle things. Like I think a classic one is when people say, I still wake up at night, but I fall back asleep a little quicker. That's the big one. Or another one is actually when people say, I'm surprised I only get so much sleep, but I feel pretty good. I actually feel maybe even more alert during the day. Those little things are very encouraging signs. And when you have one of those, like really hold on to it, grab, focus on it, talk about it, write it down. That those like positive signs just like become stepping stones on your way up. So yeah, there's definitely that nosedive often in the beginning of starting CBTI. Now the other question here is, what if you can't leave your bedroom? Like, what should you be doing? Well, here's the thing. And actually, let me add a kind of a tip that I often share, but I think is a really good one. People often struggle with the stimulus control part, the part where you're like supposed to leave the bed if you can't sleep. And one thing I learned from Michael Schwartz, I'm mentioning a lot of names here, but I feel like it's fair because they taught me these things, was like a technique where when you wake up at night and you feel like, okay, I don't know if I'm going to go back to sleep again. I really don't want to leave my bed, but maybe I have to. What should I be doing? Well, one thing you can do is like just try to do like mental imagery. Imagine yourself in a pleasant space somewhere and you're enjoying it. And if that comes easy to you, you can stay in bed. You're probably going to go back to sleep again. But if that does not, if you're kind of frustrated, then get out of bed. And that is like the key thing, I believe. If you're in bed frustrated at night, that's not good. But if you're in bed and you're kind of like, you're enjoying it's nice and cozy and warm at night, you can stay in bed. So with that said, as a little context here, what you want to do if one cannot leave the bedroom, well, it just becomes a matter of finding something you can do in your bedroom, or if you have a really small bedroom, even in your bed, that still is taking your efforts away from sleep, that is kind of shifting attention away from sleep. And in my opinion, that could be anything. That could be reading, listening to podcasts, even using your phone or an iPad. I think it's always good not to know the time, if that's possible, not to know the time. But I believe that it's not important to keep it like dark and not stimulating, because I feel that can become frustrating, because you're in a sense like trying to sleep, and what you want when you wake up at night and can't sleep is not to try anymore, to shift your mind. So that would be my tip here. So yeah, I think that hopefully that was helpful to you, Sheadon. Thanks so much for the support, and we shall move on here to let's see if I can navigate here. Yeah, I got everything here. This is from Jay, who's been contributing a lot lately. And just a quick a little bit of background. Jay is really concerned that he may have a extremely rare condition called fatal insomnia, and I'm not going to read the entire message here, but there was something I thought was really important here. So Jace is saying that most nights it takes about 2 to 3 hours to fall asleep, and the most times I've slept about 3 hours if I'm lucky, and then I can't go back to sleep, which is, if I remember correctly, Jay, I mean, sleeping 3 hours is very little, but if I remember correctly, you were sleeping more like 1 hour in the past, so that's always something to just keep taking note of. But here's what I really wanted to focus on. Here. I can rarely ever take naps. The other day I told my mom I'm going to take a nap. It felt like I had REM sleep. She checked on me and said, Jay, you didn't answer. It didn't look like I was having deep sleep. Now, so what I want to point out here is that when there was another subscriber that I can't forget his name for the life of me now, but he had his brother had taken a picture of him when he was sleeping, and he was 100% sure that he hadn't fallen asleep at all. In your case, Jay, it sounds like you may not have been convinced that you slept, but your mom thinks that you slept. I think when you're concerned about like having extremely little sleep, it could be helpful to have somebody kind of check in on you and give you like feedback on how much you sleep. And maybe you'll find that the other person, in your case, maybe your mom, will say, Jay, you slept, I think you slept about 5 hours, and that could be some reassurance for you if you think you slept much less than that. So just a little thing there I wanted to share, Jay. And with that said, we're moving on here to a message from my namesake, Daniel. And he said the following. I believe this was earlier today, maybe? No, this was Friday. Hey Daniel, it's Daniel again. I had another thought that I haven't heard talked about much by anyone and wanted to see if you have any ideas. Morvan syndrome is kind of related to FFI or delirium tremens. It affects sleep in the same way as FFI. Have you ever heard of this? Know anything about it? It's kind of creepy and has me worried. Anyway, enjoy your weekend. Always good talking. And then there's a little bit more in a message later on. I was wondering if you heard back from Gasper in episode 201. Do you know how he's doing? Or about Catherine ASMR in episode 161. Hopefully they got better. No, there was somebody else that mentioned this thing called Morvan syndrome. Never heard of it before. Somebody commented on that in the channel here. I talked quite a bit about like familial fatal insomnia and sporadic fatal insomnia, which I honestly think are just distractions. I feel like, and with Morvan syndrome too, I think these are like very serious conditions. I don't know much about Morvan, but a little bit I read about it. I think these are serious conditions where it is, in my humble opinion, it is obvious to an outside person, a friend or a family member or somebody like that. It's obvious that something is wrong with you, like in these fatal insomnias, like you have problems with ataxia, you can express yourself, something is obviously wrong. And I think insomnia is really not a major part of like at least the initial presentation of those. I know for familial insomnia, it can be, but again, you wouldn't have that if you don't have a family member who had that. So then it becomes like, what if I have sporadic fatal insomnia? Well, those, when you look at case reports of that, sleep is not an early symptom, sleep early symptom. So I almost think these are just distractions, and as I say, if you have a concern about your health, you have to talk to your doctor, obviously. But that's kind of how I feel about it. Gasper from episode 201 No, I didn't hear much about him, but but for him, it was very important, I felt, to talk about how he had this very, very rare condition, and I haven't heard from him since. But I feel like, I know, Gasper, if you're listening to this, please feel free to comment. But I get a little bit of a sense that he really wanted to talk about it, and maybe wanted a little bit of attention. Is a little bit what I'm trying to say here, but we'll still trying to be very respectful of everyone. Catherine, haven't heard from her, but again, I hope they're doing better. So Daniel, I hope this was helpful to you, and thanks so much for all the support. And with that said, we talked about all the comments from Facebook, and we will move on to emails, of which there are two. The first one is an email that came in 11 hours ago from the Czech Republic, I believe. So let's read this. Hi Daniel. Firstly, I would like to apologize for my English because I'm not a native speaker. I come from Czechia and English is my second language. Well, I think you're doing fantastic. English is my second language too, by the way. Swedish is my first, although lived here in the States for 12 years, so pretty fluent. Secondly, I want to thank you for everything you do for people with insomnia. I appreciate your work and effort. I super appreciate your email, Martin here, and it's really emails like yours that really makes this channel meaningful. So I want to thank you. I started in July this year, just a few days after my uncle passed away in sleep because of a heart attack. And unfortunately, I started to think about it more and more and developed a fear of dying in sleep and was very anxious about it. So basically, since then, I've started sleep less than usual, waking during the night often, and was really scared about this. So I've tried to solve this issue with CBD oil, but it turned out that it did not help me at all. Then my girlfriend suggested start going to psychotherapy, not CBT or CBTI, which helped me get away from the fear of dying, but eventually the fear of not having good sleep stayed in my mind. So I decided to go see my doctor, who prescribed me melatonin, but again, it didn't help me at all. So August this year, I was very desperate because I thought I will not sleep any longer. I tried to solve my issue with alcohol and drugs, benzol, salpidem, but then I realized that this solution would not help me in the long term. I decided to see a psychiatrist who prescribed me an antidepressant called mirtazapine, but after 2 weeks of using it, I didn't notice any improvement on my sleep. Since then, I've also tried kinesiology, autohypnosis, Chinese medicine, but again, it didn't help. I'm still getting very little sleep, approximately 2 to 5 hours. And it seems bizarre for me because I noticed that just after I finally fall asleep, I start dreaming, and then I wake up, check the time, and find out only 1 or 2 hours have passed after that. I can't sleep until the morning comes. It seems really weird for me because I'm not that tired during the day. I only have headaches sometimes, but I can be active like before the insomnia started affecting my life. So right now, I really want your help because I don't know what to do next. Maybe I'm just worried about the case of my insomnia because I really don't know whether it is psychological or physical. At first, I thought it had something to do with anxiety, but then I started to find more about insomnia and think it could also be caused by some neurological disease. Because in the last 3 weeks, I've noticed a little muscle twitching in my body. What do you recommend me to do? Should I go to a sleep study or see a neurologist? Is there any physical disease that starts with insomnia? I've read about FFI, SFI, but after I watched some of your videos, I know that it can't be my case because my sleep sometimes gets better and sometimes gets worse. It's not worsening day by day. I also check time during the night, and I want to know how many minutes or hours have passed from the time I get to bed. And finally, when I go to bed, after like 2 hours of not sleeping, I start to be sleepy. So I usually fall asleep at 5 or 6 a.m. When I give up attempts to fall asleep, after 3 to 4 hours, I'm wide awake. Finally, I want to admit that my sleep hygiene is not perfect. So when I'm twisting in bed from midnight to 3 a.m. and after falling asleep until 8 or 9, then I'm staying in bed until 11 a.m. because I just want to get some rest. I also check the time during the night. I know it's a mistake, but I can't help it. I really do not know what to do with my situation because I even thought I don't sleep much. I'm not that tired, and when I fall asleep, it seems like I start dreaming immediately. Martin, this is a lot we can learn from this email. A lot. And I think my first like general thought when I'm reading this is that almost everything in your email, if not everything actually, I think I want to say everything in your email is classic. I am saying that in the sense of like not trying to say that you're not a unique person and that there are unique circumstances. Of course there are, but everything you're describing here are things that I hear all the time, and that should make you feel good, because when we realize that our insomnia is not that unusual, actually, that is a good first step, because then we also realize and see that what is helping other people can help myself, can help you and anybody else with a similar story. So that said, let's break it down. Let's really spend some time here. I think it's going to be really, really helpful. I wish I could remember which episode it is, but I talk about this quite a lot, and you can read up this too. There's something called the 3P model, which kind of explains how insomnia develops. It's not for everyone. It's a little bit different for everyone, but basically I think it's a really good model, and it kind of goes like this: that some people are more or less predisposed to having insomnia, kind of like genetically predisposed, or by maybe how we were brought up may have something to do with it, but I think it's mainly genetic, really. And if you are like a person that worries a lot, if you're a little bit OCD, kind of like organized, if you're an overthinker, if you're a night owl, if you're an early bird, all those things make it more likely for you to have insomnia at some point. But the important thing here is that a lot of people are early birds, night owls, overthinkers, worriers, and they sleep fine. So that doesn't, like, having that kind of predisposition doesn't necessarily mean that doesn't mean you're going to have insomnia, but you just have that kind of like predisposition. But then there's something that kicks insomnia in, and that's really, like in your case, your uncle died in a heart attack in sleep. That started you kind of worrying sleep. You had that initial bout of insomnia, sleeplessness. That initial reaction is normal. Like when something happens, like our family member dies, we're kind of supposed not to sleep well. If I said my uncle died and I slept great, that doesn't feel right. There's kind of not that emotional normal reaction, which is we're a little bit tense. We think about it, and that's a normal reaction. But what's happened next? That's where the problem begins. It's when we start identifying insomnia as a problem. We're like, whoa, I haven't slept well in 2 weeks. I got a problem. I got to fix this. And what happens then is this, like, we're trying to fix our sleep by doing things, but nothing but wakefulness can produce sleep. Nothing but wakefulness can actually produce sleep. So all those things we're trying, they don't make you sleep more. They make you sleep like worse, in fact. Then we try more things, then they make it even worse. Then we feel even more worried. Then we try more things. And that's how, like, the spiral begins. And that's how chronic insomnia develops. So it's really the reaction to those normal sleepless nights after stress that causes chronic insomnia. So in your case, I can see classic. You've tried so many things to like sleep better, and all these things are called sleep efforts. Sleep efforts is when you try to do something to sleep more, never works. Now, there was many important things here. Firstly, okay, I think this is the next one. I've noticed that just after I finally fall asleep, I start dreaming, and that let's keep that one in mind. And then you'd mentioned some kind of twitches, and you're also mentioning that it's weird that you don't sleep much, but you still function pretty good during the day. All those three things sound like what's called hyperarousal. Hyperarousal, such an important thing when it comes to insomnia. I think to some degree hyperarousal always drives insomnia. And hyperarousal is like kind of one step below worrying, 2 steps below frank anxiety maybe. It's when our mind is kind of like running at a hyper space. We're like really aware of what's going on. We're really focused in on everything that's happening. We sense things in our body and outside in a more vivid way. People often say, like, I'm asleep but really not. I can hear everything that's going on, and that can really explain all these things. Twitches, things like we wouldn't notice normally, or wouldn't maybe even have normally, either like occur because of that hyperarousal, like our nervous system is kind of like on high alert, or it's twitches that we have normally that we wouldn't even recognize, you know, super common with hyperarousal. Falling asleep, going straight into like dreaming, you know, in my mind also hyperarousal, because like you don't go into deep sleep, you kind of like you kind of fall asleep and you wake up, fall asleep, wake up, and it's not necessarily that you dream more, it's just like you remember all these dreams. It's like sometimes people have towards the early morning too, like when you're kind of in and out of sleep, you just remember all the dreams. Hyperarousal, and yeah, like that feeling of like I have so much energy, it's weird, like I didn't sleep much. Hyperarousal, classic. And then the other thing, like you sleep very little, and then you're like only so much time passed. But I think, you know, you have several things that are in your favor. I want to say we are now in September, so August this year, like July this year, July, August, September. This has really been going on for about 2 months, which is a long time to have trouble sleeping for anyone, but comparing it to somebody that has insomnia for 10 years, very different story. Because I think when you had insomnia for decades, like the beliefs are so ingrained, and yeah, it's really harder for somebody that had insomnia for a long time to get past it than somebody who's had it for months. So that's a positive. The other positive is, you know, you say here in the end that I know my sleep hygiene is not perfect. Like you kind of have a sense of what you should be doing. So in fact, just to kind of clarify something, sleep hygiene in my mind is when you're like, sleep hygiene is trying to keep it dark, keep it cool, not eat too much, not exercise, blah, blah, blah. Really, in my opinion, has no impact on sleep, really not that important. But in your case, it sounds like you're spending a lot of time in bed. I didn't say exactly, you know, midnight. You may go to bed to midnight, I read, and then stay in bed until 11 a.m. That's like 11 hours. And I think you know that this is too much. And like, you know, somebody with trouble sleeping should spend less time in bed, for sure. You know, maybe 7 hours, maybe 6, you know, maybe 6.5, something like that. And I think probably what is keeping you from spending less time in bed, Martin, is that you're worried about not getting enough sleep. And this is kind of a classic strategy with insomnia. It's like casting a wide net. I'm going to see how much sleep I can get. I'm going to take every opportunity to sleep. I need more sleep. I want more sleep. Doesn't work. You know, what happens instead is that you spend a lot of time in bed, and if you add up all the little pieces of sleep, maybe it is 6 hours. Who knows? But it's like fragmented, superficial, poor quality sleep. What you want is that juicy, nice, deep, refreshing, rejuvenating sleep, and you get that by spending less time in bed, by getting up early, by staying active, by staying distracted from sleep, by doing things that are fun and engaging, and then only spending maybe 6.5, 7 hours in bed or something like that. It may sound like a terrible, frightening idea, but it's so important for anyone with trouble sleeping, really. And I think, you know, I hope this was helpful, Martin. I feel like there was a lot we learned from this email. It was a really, I'm really grateful for it. Stay in touch, Martin, and share. Please share with us how things go. And then we have the final one, which is from Justin, and from a day ago, from Sunday. Hello, Daniel. I just found your YouTube channel and I'm so thankful for it. I'm very thankful for your email, Justin. I've struggled with sleep since I started working third shift, 10 p.m. to 8 a.m. 4 days a week last November. I've always had stress about sleeping during daytime since I went to this shift, not by choice. And when I first started working overnight, I used to sleep from 8:30 a.m. till 3:30 p.m. most days, with 2 or 3 wake-ups per sleep day. However, the last couple of months, my wake-up time was moved from 3:30 p.m. to 3 p.m. to 2:30 to barely 2 p.m. now. Some days I wake up at 1:45 p.m. and lay there for an hour trying to fall asleep before giving up. I've tried melatonin, other sleep aids, and antidepressants for my doctor, trazodone, and nothing helps. The worst part is I've started sleeping poor on my nights off work too. This past weekend off work, I woke up almost hourly overnight, which each wake up adding to the stress and making things worse. On most nights off, I find myself waking up around the same time each night, always worried about how tired I will be in the morning. Little history. I have OCD, have received CBT for the past, and I'm very experienced with CBT for OCD. I see a lot of parallels between my OCD and the sleep issue I'm experiencing. I understand the paradoxical nature of CBT and anxiety. Ignoring it and not giving in will eventually make it go away, but trying to not think of a pink elephant is going to make you think of a pink elephant. Exactly. I'm pretty sure most of my sleep issues are mental. It seems when I have a bad night, the next night is even worse, and my sleeping is just continually degrading. I want to seek help before I get even worse, and I know medication and freaking out about it isn't the answer for me. I'm making changes now to my bedroom, like removing clocks so I don't keep staring at them every time I wake up. And I was logging my sleep length to track and monitor it, but I won't be doing that anymore. I want to leave the bed during the times I can't fall asleep, but during the day, the rest of my house is very bright. My bedroom is pitch black, and I'm afraid of leaving my room won't help me, but actually hurt me. Maybe I should set up a chair in my room next to my bed. I'm looking for a CBTI professional near Omaha, Nebraska, but having trouble finding one right now that is a network with my health insurance. If you have any advice, greatly appreciate it. Absolutely. And then Justin also said, I'd love if you talk about shift work disorder and sleeping during the day for working. And my biggest concern is whether or not I should nap in the evening as a second sleeping event before I go to work. If I only slept 5 hours during the morning. Thanks. Thank you, Justin. And this is I would say the one time where I feel like things like it's not, most of the time actually when I read comments and emails, it's very straightforward. I know exactly what somebody in a certain situation should be doing or thinking, etc. When it comes to shift work, it gets harder, particularly if you have a kind of a rotating shift. So I guess, at least always trying to be positive. One is that I think just you have the same shift every day. I think that makes things a little bit easier. Now, let's see. I feel like other positive things is like you have experience with CBT. A lot of things you're talking about makes total sense. And what else? I felt there was one more thing I wanted to add, but it slipped my mind. But I think all the things you're talking about make total sense. So, a couple of things. With insomnia in general, one of the biggest reasons we have insomnia is the fear of not sleeping well, of course, and kind of the desire and the attempts to get more sleep. And I think in your case, Justin, I read here for sometimes I wake up at 1:45 and I lay there for an hour trying to fall back asleep before giving up. That is, that's not helpful, because that as you know this, but I'm just adding it for everyone else and for context, that creates frustration. Like you're trying to sleep, you can't, you become more anxious, more worried, etc. So I think one thing that definitely is to consider here is to do a little bit of bedtime restriction, and decide that if you're let's say most days you wake up 2 p.m. before you woke up at 3:30 p.m. So let's just do the math there. 8:30, let's say 9:30, 10:30, 11:30, 12:30, 1:30, and then half an hour more. So that's 5.5 hours, which is not a lot of time, but for most people, if you got 5.5 hours of good quality, solid sleep, that could you could do pretty well with that. So I think one thing to consider is to basically do bedtime restriction But you know, with the different time in mind here. So basically decide like, okay, instead of having my wake up time like an alarm set at 3:30 p.m., then maybe start off by like setting an alarm at 2 and saying like, that's, you know, that I'm gonna be in bed from 8:30 a.m. to 2, and we calculate that as 5.5 hours, which is actually a pretty not unusual kind of bedtime restriction thing to start off with. And the goal would be to find yourself like consistently sleeping like 8:30 to 2, 8:30 to 2, and like just building sleep confidence and feeling like, yeah, this is kind of working, I'm getting regular, and then moving it up to 2:30, you know, and then maybe moving up to 3 and maybe back to 3:30. Confidence is so important when it comes to sleep. When we believe we can sleep, it comes naturally. When you're worried about it, we can't sleep, you know. So that could be something to think about. Something to consider for sure. And then what if you wake up, you know, before that, and you should, you know, the kind of classical CBTI teaching is like you should leave the bedroom. This is another unique scenario, similar to Sheadon's a little bit, like you can't leave your bedroom. And I think in your case, you know, mostly I'm one of those who are like, I don't think light really is a big problem when you wake up at night. Should I turn the lights on? Not. I don't think that's a problem. But in your case, it's different, like sunlight, and you know, that could be an issue. So maybe having like a chair within that dark room where you can read or do something like that, something to consider for sure. And I felt there was more. Oh yeah. Here's another one that I think could be helpful. Oftentimes when, and I don't know if this is if this is happening to you, Justin, or not, but a lot of times people have like this like anticipatory insomnia. They're like, if I can't sleep, if I don't get enough sleep tonight, I know, or I think that I won't be able to do my job. I can't function. I'm going to be so tired. I'm going to fall asleep. I'm going to make all these mistakes. And oftentimes it's like, it's important to question that and come up with proof proof to the opposite. Finding examples of, you know, that time I didn't sleep that well, but you know, I actually did my job well, or the opposite, like I slept well, but like I was kind of tired at work. Because when you can find evidence that, you know, not everything hinges upon sleep. Sleep is not the only thing that determines how well I do or well I perform. Then you also become less afraid of having those like sleepless nights, and less fear equals more sleep. That's another good one. And then CBTI professional, I can say that, this is a good time to mention Martin Reed, insomniacoach.com. Martin Reed is a good friend, super smart guy. He has a program, so I recommend him. I recommend, and here's an interesting one, Michael Schwartz. You can Google, or you actually go to his homepage, sleeponq, sleepon.q.com, Michael Schwartz. He does, I believe, phone-based coaching, and guess what? It's for free. He's a super smart guy, but he offers this for free, and I think he says he gives people the PayPal, like his PayPal account, and says like, if this helps you, consider donating. And I don't think this is gonna last. I think at some point he's gonna have to charge, but for now he's doing it for free. So definitely, you know, consider talking to him. If you have an iPhone, you know, consider downloading my app, Bedtime, where I'm currently the coach, and happy to coach you there, Justin, or anybody else. And if you have an Android, then there will be a version in a couple of months, and hopefully in a couple of months nobody will need it of those people that are on the channel here, but it's in the works. Justin, thanks so much for this. And there was another one. Should I take a nap in the evening as a second sleeping event before I go to work? You know, this is where, again, the shift work thing makes it difficult. I think my gut feeling is that for somebody in this situation, the best thing to do probably is not taking that nap, and then instead trying to get all their sleep in one window. You know, of course, like the importance of your work and how you feel is like, you have to contextualize this for you. But kind of my gut feeling, somebody in this scenario, it's probably better not to take that nap and try to get all sleep in one chunk. That is my gut feeling. Okay, and I think that was Justin. So yeah, we talked about everything we were to talk about today. I had that feeling that I'm missing something. Like, I'm gonna just quickly check the YouTube comments because I felt I skipped one there, but we commented on MFF. Global Watch. I'm waiting to hear from Global Watch. And no, I think we went through everything. All right. Well, let me just finish off here. Thanks so much, everyone, for tuning in. Thanks for all the comments. Thank you for all the emails and messages. And I think what's going to happen here is I think Mondays and Thursdays will pretty much be this maybe longer format, reply to multiple people. And then Tuesday, Wednesdays, and Fridays will be maybe those shorter, like, insights. We'll see. This seems to be where things are trending. So all this said, it is a wrap for today, and hope to have you back here really soon. Until then, take it easy. Bye now.